I'm going to record this part since you're not able to speak right now. Hopefully it's okay with everyone, but I've had a number of requests if we could have this recorded. So some preliminary comments. I'd like to mention that I attended the Michaelmas or World Conference back in October in Dornoch, and at that time the science section met and they decided to take up the challenge of technology. And along those lines, I'm starting in January a study group. We will meet for 30 minutes weekly, and there will be a 30-minute, roughly, reading assignment each week. We're going to be starting sometime in January, and if you're interested, send me an email, send your home time zone and what days work and what days don't. Also in this talk, I'm assuming some familiarity with anthroposophical terminology and themes, and also when I'm quoting, there will be the word man or mankind showing up, and I apologize in advance to those who get offended by seeing such male-oriented terminology. Just a little bit about what the work I've been doing so you can kind of get up to speed a little bit. I've looked at mythology as a preparer for our times. We, in that, look through the stories of Genesis and the change from humanity being asexual beings to being sexual, also withdrawal of the moon at that time. We look at Cain and Abel as separate streams, and Prometheus and Hephaestus out of Greek mythology and what they mean for today. We also look at the merging of humans with machines. What are machines doing to us? We'll look at artificial intelligence and what I call artificial soul. And in a third series, we look at machines and evolution. We'll look at cosmic evolution and earthly evolution as well as human evolution. And then lastly, looking at some of the questions that people have heard, perhaps the term moral technology. So there's questions about electricity and evil and the human double. So it's important to ask and understand, what is human will? And I want to start out by saying it is not what one wants out of one's desires. The dictionary calls it deliberate action. It's certainly causes movement, some change to which the will is applied, and we can call it a spiritual activity that acts upon matter. It is a soul activity when one considers the soul's activities as being those of thinking, feeling, and willing. In our thinking, we are most awake, and our feeling, it's similar to a dreaming consciousness, and in our willing, we are really in a consciousness that's akin to dreamless sleep. We can talk about willed thinking. This is common in anthroposophical terms. And this is a kind of thinking that you're not led by the outer stream of sensory perceptions, but you're doing your own thinking. So it's often sense-free thinking in this sense. Will also has to do with the future. It originates out of one's own eye, and in order to become aware of your own willing activity, you need a physical body and the resistance of gravity. Now, much is written in anthroposophical journals and books about dangers of technology, dangers from electricity and electromagnetic radiation and so on. Often such literature seeks to thrill through terror. Waldorf education is known as schools where the children of high-tech executives attend because they somehow know that it is better for their children to learn without the screen and computer devices. By association, the anthroposophists are often today associated with Luddites. Luddites are those who once sought to prevent the industrial age. Not only anthroposophists, but many in general in the public mistakenly believe that this surge of technology should be opposed in part because it is evil and will lead to a world unworthy of the human being. So I'm seeking in this talk and others that I do to change this attitude and perception. For fear only feeds what we do not intend. As we will see, spiritual science needs to be on the forefront of this future. So I'm going to read to you a little quote to get us started from Steiner, or apparently from Steiner. It goes, "We must eradicate from the soul all fear and terror of what comes towards mankind out of the future. We must look forward with absolute equanimity to whatever comes, and we must think only that whatever comes is given us by a world direction full of wisdom. It is part of what we must learn during this age, namely to act out of pure trust in the ever-present help of the spiritual world. Truly nothing else will do if our courage is not to fail us. Therefore, let us discipline our will and let us seek the awakening within ourselves every morning and every evening." Now, I couldn't do an anthroposophic lecture without mentioning Lucifer and Ahriman. Now, between these two, like the center staff of Hermes Caduceus, we have the Christ. Let us look at the Christ impulse as it exists between our intellect and our will. So I tried to make a little diagram here. Earlier, we had the downfall of Luciferic beings, while today we have the rise of Ahrimanic beings. Luciferic beings influence our power of thought. Ahrimanic beings influence our power of will. We have to recognize the arrival of Ahrimanic beings in our world today. They are arriving now within the evolution of mankind because we have reached the peak of evolution and we are now entering a period of devolution. We shall not comprehend the human race without taking these beings into consideration. And then you can see where that comes from. Thus, it is correct to always picture the crucifixion as three, representing Lucifer, the Christ, and Ahriman. Now, in this picture, can you tell which one the artist was portraying as Ahriman? Obviously, the one on the right, as you see it. So I'm going to use a timeline here. You see on this parabola descending and then ascending the various ages. There are Vedic names for these. The English names would be a golden age, a silver age, and a bronze age, and then entering Kali Yuga, the dark age. The impulses entering humanity from a Luciferic source sank down gradually into the soul. On the other hand, however, another impulse, which we call Ahrimanic, is growing stronger and stronger in modern times. It will become increasingly strong in the near future and on into future ages. The Ahrimanic impulse proceeds from a super-sensible being, different from the being of Christ or of Lucifer. Equally with super-sensible, we could say a subsensible. The influence of this being becomes especially powerful in this, the fifth post-Atlantean epoch. We look at the confused conditions of our times, and we shall find that men have brought such chaotic conditions mainly through these Ahrimanic powers. So just as there was an incarnation of Lucifer at the beginning of the third pre-Christian millennium, so there was a Christ incarnation at the time of the mystery of Golgotha, of course, in the middle of this, and so there will be a Western incarnation of the Ahriman being sometime in our present earthly existence in this third post-Christian millennium. To form a right conception of the historical evolution of mankind during approximately 6,000 years, one must grasp that at one pole stands a Luciferic incarnation, in the center, the incarnation of Christ, and at the other pole, an Ahrimanic incarnation. Now, there are beings who will be on the human stage when Earth becomes a new planetary condition that in esoteric terms, they use the term Jupiter. These beings who are being pushed up from behind, from below, for behind them stands the Ahrimanic powers, which endow them with their strong willpower, which pours into them their directive forces. These beings, who as such are subhuman beings now, are controlled in their totality by higher Ahrimanic spirits, and thus contain something which far surpasses their own nature and being. Therefore, they show something in their appearance which, if it takes a human being captive, acts much more strongly, very much more strongly, than that which the weak human being can control today if he does not strengthen his soul through the Spirit. So what is the aim of these Ahrimanic beings? Well, they want to permeate human willing. And what do they want? They want to burrow into the deepest stratum of our consciousness, in which the human being is still asleep today when we're in our waking state. Man does not notice how these beings enter his soul and also his body. Here they suck in with their power of attraction everything that has remained Luciferic, that has not become Christ permeated. This they can reach, this they can take possession of. So, our time raises problems for us, and we must no longer pass these by. Now, they're not convenient for most people to hear about, for it has become convenient for human beings to think differently, or I should say, to not think at all about what the human being is, to not take them into consideration. Today, technology enables a few to do the willed thinking for the many. The result is that more and more of humanity lacks the ability to bring will into their thinking. And it is not without danger to speak about these things in complete truth at a time when many people do not at all love the sense of truth. Quite apart from the fact that a false sentimentality might find these things to be, for them, actually a psychic cruelty is what they might call it. The result of the comprehension of these things, however, will be a thorough grasp of the necessity for the Christ impulse. One must recognize where the Christ impulse, though, is lacking. The Christ impulse takes hold in the middle stratum of our consciousness. If man really permeates himself with the Christ, then these Ahrimanic beings cannot penetrate through this middle stratum upward. They cannot, with their spiritual forces, pull down the intellectual forces, and everything for our time depends on that. You see, in the fifth post-Atlantean cultural age, and you'll see the initials PACE, PACA for post-Atlantean cultural age, illusion by itself will be seized upon by evil. It will all be permeated by cleverness, that is intelligence. This should sound to you like virtual reality, but do not think that this means you are to avoid virtual reality as an evil. It sounds paradoxical when one asserts that it is good for men that they can learn to know all these things, But the fact is, the human being can only come to spiritual freedom by growing strong against some resistance. And that resistance is provided by evil in our times. Moreover, precisely that which is connected with the number 5, meaning the 5th post-Atlantean cultural age, is always connected in this way with the unfolding of evil. We must not regard evil from the outset as one would who, in the fullness of their egoism, merely wanted to get away, to flee from it. No, we must penetrate evil with consciousness. We must really learn to know it. And above all, in our time, already a force is preparing in the realm of human beings, a force which tends to create illusions that are harmful and destructive. So let's take a look at our evolving human consciousness. A permanent stamp is made upon the general consciousness of mankind. Whenever you unite the spirit in you with the mineral world, for example, when you make a machine, indeed, you even change the atoms worked upon. Everything that is performed without regard to self, that is connected with the interests of another, helps to intensify and to strengthen our consciousness in the future struggles for existence. For example, you build something, say a church for others. You do it for them, not for yourself. Whatever is achieved in the way of development of consciousness in the world does something to further the evolution of consciousness for every single being, even if such a being has not actually worked at the development of his own consciousness. So we'll take a look now again at this anthroposophical bathtub, some people like to call it. And in the first 2 cultural ages following Atlantean times, it was commonplace to experience spiritual beings. But to allow for the destiny that humanity would develop freedom, the spiritual world had to withdraw. When the development of the sentient soul began, humanity was entering Kali Yuga, when all connection to the spiritual world would gradually be lost. To continue guidance, the ancient mysteries came into existence. Here, certain individuals retained, through the bloodline, astral organs, or they were specially trained to have such organs of spiritual perception open for them. These were used moralistically, if I can, that's a word, to guide an ethnic people according to divine will. In other lectures, I will show how, with the collective picture consciousness of each ethnic group, this guidance came in the form of true stories that we today label myths. These myths were laid aside along with the etheric body after death, only to be viewed again upon one's approach to their next incarnation. Myths, such as the stories of Prometheus and those of Hephaestus, prepared us for our current incarnation. When the development of the intellectual soul got underway, both materialism and egoism arose. In the 4th century, the last of the increasingly decadent mystery centers was destroyed because it was a time what early Christians called the coming end of the earth, when the spiritual impulses that can arise through the earth or from its reflection could no longer bestow spiritual knowledge to mankind, even through the mysteries. But now with the intellectual soul, some could say, I think, and I feel, and I am the one that is willing. No longer did one appeal to the muses or the gods, such as in the stories of Homer. In the 15th century, evolution reached the point where the consciousness soul development began. The intellectual soul does not stop its development here. It continues on. But now, whenever, let's see, but now whenever it is without the mediation of the consciousness soul, the intellectual soul believes it is ever so clever that it can dismiss the need for religion. At the end of the 20th century, Steiner stresses that several types of spiritual beings are now here to assist human and earthly evolution. But these beings need human beings to work with them, or their insertions will end up being painful and disruptive to us. Who are these spiritual beings? There are several, but the main two are the great teachers of humanity, also known as moon beings, who departed with the moon when it left the earth, and they still taught humanity through the mysteries. The Vulcan beings, are here, and we can ask the question, who are these Vulcan beings? Well, an interesting hint is Vulcan is the Latin name for the Greek god of technology, namely Hephaestus. Again, why are they here now? Because we have preparations to do for significant future events that will take thousands of years to complete those preparations. We need their guidance now to do this correctly within the short time that is left. The next post-Atlantean age begins around 3573 AD. It will be the Slavic people, and especially the Russian people, who are endowed to lead culture then. This will be a time of decreasing fertility, so that soon after the end of this Russian-led Paka, by about the end of the start of the 7th millennium, all women will be infertile. Sorry, just a second. Didn't realize that was showing up in the middle. All women will be infertile. This is why Steiner points to the Russian